Hello students. Today we're going to look at volume of a cone. Now yesterday we looked at volume of a cylinder, and cones and cylinders are similar in that they both have bases that are circles. A cone just doesn't have a circle at the other end. It meets at a tip. And I have one written, drawn, cone A, it looks like maybe an ice cream cone. Cone B looks like perhaps one of those tall hats that wizards used to wear or something. So they can be drawn any of these ways. The important thing is knowing where the height is, because the formula for volume of a cone is exactly the same as formula for volume of a cylinder with one addition. So we know that the volume is something about the area of the base times the height, but because it's a cone, we always start with 1/3 BH. And we'll talk about that 1/3 is all about in class. Okay, so the formula is 1/3 capital B, which is the area of the base times the height. Well, we just said earlier that the circle is the base of a cone, so I hope you remember what the formula for area of a circle is, and that's pi r squared. So we could write this out as V equals 1/3 pi r squared and then the h. And that's what we would use to actually plug in our numbers to find the volume of the cone. We use our calculator. After this, once we plug in the numbers, we let the calculator do the rest of the work, and we're going to round to the nearest hundredth. So let's start with cone A. We're going to call this cone A, and we're going to find the volume of this cone. How much can this cone hold if we were to put stuff inside of it? So V equals 1/3, and then pi, and then r. R is the distance from the center of the circle to the outside edge. And here we have r is 4. I don't have to divide this by 2, multiply by 2, anything, because it starts at the center and goes to the outside edge. Then that's my radius, which is r. So that is 4 squared. And then times height. Height in this case is 8 inches. Now before I go on, I want to explain something about height, and you need to write this down somewhere on the side of your composition book. Height is always found at a right angle. So we're going to write that. Height is always found at a right angle. Make that big, underline, put a box around it, something, because that's going to be really, really important for later on. Height is always found at a right angle. And I know it's kind of cut off, but I think you get the picture. Here's my right angle right here. So I know that that's the height. Okay? Now, sometimes you might see this labeled, the side labeled, but that isn't the height. That's something completely different. The height is always going to be from the center of the circle all the way to the tip of the cone. Okay? So now let's keep going with our calculator. Now that I have these numbers here, I'm going to plug it into the calculator. And you're probably thinking to yourself, how do I put in 1/3, Mr. Cohens? Well, that's great. 1 divided by 3. That's all you do. So I'm going to type 1 divided by 3, and that gives me the 1/3. It even looks like a fraction on your calculator, just like that. 1 divided by 3 times pi, and you'll remember that that's second power of key, times 4, and then the x squared key, times 8. And that's what it looks like on your calculator. 1/3 times pi times 4 squared times 8. And when I hit enter, there's my answer, 134.0412066 or something like that. I'm reading backwards. And so I round it to the nearest hundredth, and so that would give me 134.04. So my answer is 134.04, and that is the volume of cone A, 134.4 square inches. Now let's do volume B. I'm just going to erase this part because everything else is the same. And so we're going to call this cone B. Same concept. Plug in my numbers. V equals 1/3 pi. R in this case is 2.5 because it's from the center of the circle to the outside edge. 2.5 squared times the height is 9.25. Thank goodness for calculators, or those other decimals would drive us nuts. So we're going to type that in our calculator. 1 divided by 3 times pi times 2.5 squared times 9.25. Just like that. Just in case you have that. Enter, and that's what I get. 60.54110843. And I'm going to round to the nearest hundredth, and so that answer is going to be volume equals 60.54. 60.54 squared. Sorry, that's not supposed to be square, is it? I made a mistake up here. That's supposed to be inches cubed because it's volume. Sorry about that. Go ahead and make that change up there if you wrote it as squared. But it's inches cubed because remember with volume it's length, width, and height. So we have to get all three of those dimensions in. That's why it's cubed. Here are your practice problems for tonight. Cone A has a radius of 7.5 inches and a height of 15 inches. So find the volume of that. Cone B has a height of 22 feet and a radius, of 5.4 feet. So I want you to find the volume of cone A and B, take a picture of it, and submit it through Edmodo using the turn-in button so that we can know that you know what you're doing.